The saddest stories don't start with screaming or explosions. They start quietly, almost apologetically, like someone already bracing for disappointment. Paedon Brown didn't sit down to deliver wisdom or guidance or inspiration. He sat down hoping the video would record properly, hoping the audio would work, hoping, most of all, that whoever was watching wouldn't expect too much from him. From the very first seconds, there was an unspoken truth hanging in the air. This wasn't going to be advice. This was going to be a confession. And the more he talked, the clearer it became that this wasn't a man reflecting on old wounds. This was someone still actively bleeding. He says his heart breaks every time someone talks about his father. Not in a dramatic, exaggerated way. Not in the way reality TV often trains people to perform pain. He says it plainly, like a statement of fact, like gravity. Every new detail about Kody Brown feels like another confirmation of something he already knew but desperately hoped wasn't true. And yet the world keeps bringing it back to him. Over and over. In grocery store aisles. In parking lots. In moments when he's just trying to exist as a person, not as a storyline. This particular moment, the one that would eventually be dissected by Reddit threads and YouTube commentary channels, came from a $10 cameo. $10. That's all it takes to access Paedon Brown's unresolved trauma in 2026. A woman named Sarah paid for a personalized message, hoping for advice about her own broken relationship with her father. What she received instead was something far more uncomfortable and far more honest. Paedon didn't pretend to have answers. He didn't package his pain into motivational slogans. He apologized, again and again, for the video, for himself, for not being okay. He says it multiple times. He has no advice. And the repetition doesn't feel scripted. Feels like someone trying to convince himself as much as the person watching. He tells Sarah she deserves better. He tells her to keep going. He tells her forgiveness is for herself, not for the person who hurt her. And yet, beneath every word, there's an unspoken contradiction, because this is a man who clearly hasn't found forgiveness himself. Tone is strange, gentle, earnest, and devastating. He encourages Sarah to keep taking steps forward, even when it hurts, even when there's no resolution in sight. It sounds inspirational on the surface, but there's something darker underneath. This isn't healing advice. This is survival advice. This is emotional triage from someone who hasn't stopped bleeding long enough to heal. Paedon Brown is not living a glamorous post-reality TV life. He works as a strip club bouncer in North Carolina. By day, or whatever passes for day when you work nights. He records cameos for strangers who want access to the Brown family dysfunction. For every $10 video, he keeps $7.50. The rest goes to the platform. $7.50 for emotional labor that would normally require years of therapy. Welcome to the modern economy, where childhood trauma becomes a side hustle. His cameo profile markets him as a fan favorite from Sister Wives, known for honesty, candid commentary, and personality. The promise is light-hearted roasting, motivation, and behind-the-scenes insight. The reality is something much heavier. A man apologizing for not having answers. A man admitting he's drowning. A man forced to monetize pain because fame doesn't come with a pension plan. What makes the video truly gutting is what Paedon reveals about public encounters. Fans don't just recognize him. They approach him to tell him they hate his father. Not cautiously, not gently, just openly, casually, like it's small talk. One woman walked up to him and said it directly to his face. She didn't ask if it was okay. She didn't ask how he felt. She just delivered her hatred and expected him to absorb it. He was with family when it happened. That detail changes everything. 'Cause now it's not just awkward. It's humiliating. It's painful. It's strangers turning your father's failures into a public performance while your loved ones stand there watching you process it in real time. And Paedon explains that he has learned how to handle these moments. He has to be strong. He has to put on a mask. He has to act like it doesn't hurt, because reacting honestly would only create another viral moment, another clip, another headline. This is the part of reality TV no one warns you about. The cameras stop rolling, but the audience never leaves. New viewers discover old seasons every day. Old opinions get recycled. Old hatred gets refreshed. And Paedon Brown becomes the delivery system for emotions that don't belong to him. He says his heart breaks every time he learns something new about what his father did. That heartbreak isn't fading with time, it's multiplying. This isn't a closed chapter. This is a story that keeps writing itself without his consent. And the saddest part is that Paedon didn't choose any of it. He didn't choose polygamy. He didn't choose reality TV. He didn't choose to grow up in a family that would later become a cautionary tale broadcast to millions. As the video continues, his voice softens. The loud, chaotic energy people associate with him disappears. What's left is grief. Real grief. The kind that doesn't perform well but tells the truth anyway. He talks about sitting with family, all of them sad, all of them mourning not just what happened but what should have been. A father who should have shown up. A relationship that should have existed. A version of their lives that was never possible because favoritism and narcissism took priority. And then, quietly, almost as an aside, Paedon mentions the last time he spoke to his father. It was at his brother Garrison's funeral. That single sentence reframes everything. Because suddenly, this isn't just estrangement. This is grief layered on top of grief. Trauma stacked so high there's no room left to breathe. Whatever happened at that funeral didn't bring healing. It didn't bring reconciliation. It became the final bookmark in a relationship that had already been falling apart for years. Paedon doesn't go into details. He doesn't need to. The way he says it, it didn't go how it could have gone, but it went better than it could have, says enough. It's the diplomatic language of someone protecting a memory that doesn't deserve public consumption. And yet, the silence between him and his father has now stretched into years. 2 years of watching Kody Brown on television. 2 years of hearing him claim victimhood. 2 years of strangers approaching Paedon to share opinions about a man who is still, despite everything, his father. 2 years of heartbreak renewing itself over and over again. And this is only the beginning. After that funeral, silence became the relationship. Not the peaceful kind of silence that allows healing, but the kind that settles in like fog and never fully lifts. 2 years passed without conversations, without check-ins, without even the illusion of effort. And during that time, Paedon Brown didn't get distance from his father's shadow. He got more exposure to it. Every new season, every interview, every clip of Kody Brown performing heartbreak on television became something Paedon had to process secondhand, usually through strangers who felt entitled to explain his own family to him. That's the part people don't understand. Estrangement doesn't mean escape. Doesn't mean the pain stops. In Paedon's case, it means the pain shows up in public, uninvited, delivered by people who think they're bonding with him. People who believe that because they hate Kody Brown, Paedon should feel validated. As if shared hatred equals shared humanity. He talks about having to be strong in front of people who hate his father. That sentence sounds simple until you sit with it. Being strong doesn't mean agreeing. Doesn't mean defending. It means swallowing whatever reaction you actually feel and replacing it with something neutral enough to keep the situation from escalating. It means performing emotional stability so strangers can walk away feeling comfortable, while you're left holding the weight they just dropped in your hands. This kind of emotional labor is invisible, but it's constant. And it's exhausting. Paedon explains that even when he's with family, especially when he's with family, those moments hurt more. Because his relatives are already grieving the same loss. They're already sitting in shared sadness about a father who couldn't show up, couldn't choose them, couldn't stop prioritizing one household over all the others. When a stranger walks up and says, "I hate your father," it doesn't just hurt Paedon. It ripples through the people standing next to him. It reopens conversations they were trying, for just a moment, not to have. And yet, the expectation is always the same. Male. Be polite. Don't make a scene. Don't let your pain inconvenience anyone else. The cameo keeps going, And Paedon keeps apologizing. For the video. For the lighting. For not looking his best. For not having answers. It's uncomfortable to watch because it feels like someone shrinking in real time. He keeps saying Sarah deserves better, even as he makes it clear he doesn't believe better is guaranteed. The advice to forgive feels more like something he wants to believe in than something he's actually living. Forgiveness, the way Paedon describes it, isn't about reconciliation. It's not about fixing the relationship. It's about survival. About not letting someone else's dysfunction consume your entire life. That distinction matters. Because it exposes a truth that never gets said out loud. Sometimes forgiveness isn't healing. Sometimes it's just damage control. And that's where the story starts to turn darker. Because while Paedon is clearly a victim of his father's behavior, he is not a clean, uncomplicated one. The script doesn't let him off the hook. And neither does reality. His own behavior has fractured relationships within the family. Years ago, he admitted to slapping his sister Gwen. She hasn't spoken to him since. He wasn't invited to her wedding. Not just because of that incident, but because of repeated comments he's made about LGBTQ people. Comments that Gwen, as a queer woman, couldn't ignore or excuse. There are also the accusations he made publicly against Mary Brown, claiming abusive behavior toward the children. Serious allegations, delivered through gossip channels rather than formal processes. Whether true, exaggerated, or somewhere in between, they permanently altered how people see him. And then there was the cameo where he rambled about racism and sexism, acknowledging his own flaws but never fully grappling with their impact. This is the uncomfortable truth. You can be deeply wounded by a terrible parent and still hurt other people in the process. Trauma doesn't automatically make you kind. Sometimes it makes you loud, defensive, reactive. And Paedon carries many of the same traits people criticize in Kody, traits he learned growing up in that household. That irony hangs over everything. He looks like his father, talks like him, emphasizes words the same way, walks through the world with the same physical presence. Imagine being estranged from someone and seeing their face every time you look in the mirror. Imagine strangers recognizing you not as yourself, but as an extension of the man who caused you so much pain. It's not just emotional inheritance. It's physical, genetic, inescapable. And then there's Garrison. Garrison Brown was 25 years old when he died by suicide in March 2024. A National Guard member. Cat dad. A young man who struggled with depression and substance abuse while feeling abandoned by his father during the COVID years. Kody Brown chose to live exclusively with Robin and her children during the pandemic, enforcing rules that made relationships with his other kids nearly impossible. For Garrison, that rejection cut deep. Paedon keeps 3 photos of Garrison in his room. He thinks about him every day. Not in a distant, nostalgic way, but actively, constantly. The grief hasn't softened. It hasn't settled. Sits right there, fully alive. And when Paedon talks about heartbreak, it's impossible to separate it from the loss of his brother. The last conversation Paedon ever had with his father happened at Garrison's funeral. That detail changes how everything else lands. Because how do you forgive someone when their behavior may have contributed to the loss you're still grieving? How do you release anger when the harm isn't theoretical? It's buried in the ground. Whatever happened at that funeral didn't heal anything. Finalized something. It took whatever hope remained and quietly shut the door. Other siblings hint at the same moment. Relationships ended. Lines were drawn. Things happened that no one wants to fully explain out loud out of respect for Garrison's memory. The family came together in grief, but instead of repairing bonds, the funeral exposed just how broken everything already was. Paedon describes it carefully. Diplomatic. Guarded. He says it could have gone worse. Which means it was already bad. And that was enough. Since then, Kody Brown has continued to claim publicly that he reaches out to his children. That his door is always open. But child after child contradicts him. Leon says he hasn't heard from his father since the funeral. Gwen calls out the favoritism. Maddie stays silent. Logan keeps his distance. The pattern doesn't lie. Kody Brown is estranged from roughly 14 of his 18 children. That's not miscommunication. That's not misunderstanding. That's systematic failure. And Paedon is stuck in the middle of it all, grieving a brother, processing a father who refuses accountability, and carrying the added burden of public opinion. Fans ask him constantly if he talks to Kody. They ask it so often that Paedon once wondered aloud whether people would hate him if he did. That question shouldn't exist. Your relationship with your parents should not require approval from strangers on the internet. But reality TV warps boundaries until even private pain becomes public property. Paedon didn't just lose a father. He lost the right to process that loss privately. And the worst part, the heartbreak keeps renewing itself every time Kody does something new. Night shifts have a way of amplifying everything you're trying not to think about. When the music is loud, the lights are harsh, and the hours stretch past midnight, there's nowhere to hide from your own thoughts. Paedon Brown works security at a strip club in North Carolina, breaking up fights, escorting drunk patrons out the door, absorbing aggression that has nothing to do with him. In that space, nobody cares that he grew up on television. Nobody asks him about sister wives. Nobody wants his opinion on Kody Brown. For a few hours at a time, he's just a bouncer doing a job. And that anonymity might be the closest thing to peace he has. But when the shift ends and the noise fades, the thoughts come rushing back. Grief doesn't respect schedules. Trauma doesn't clock out. The silence after work is where everything he's been holding at bay shows up at once. His brother's face. His father's voice. The funeral conversation that still hasn't found a place to land. The realization that reconciliation isn't delayed. It's dead. Paedon once said that feeling terrible about Garrison is a form of healing, because it proves the relationship mattered. It's a dark kind of comfort, the kind you cling to when the alternative is emptiness. But there's a cruel logic to it. Grief becomes proof of love. Pain becomes evidence that something real existed. Still, no amount of reframing makes waking up without your brother acceptable. Garrison was only a year younger than Paedon, 25 years old. Close enough in age that the loss doesn't feel abstract. It feels personal in a terrifying way. When Paedon looks at the timeline, he can't avoid the parallel. Same generation, same upbringing, same father. One of them didn't survive it. That awareness hums beneath everything he does, a quiet reminder that this family dysfunction isn't just sad television drama. Kills. And while Paedon is carrying that weight, the world keeps watching his father perform grief on camera. Kody Brown cries about estrangement. He talks about betrayal. He frames himself as the abandoned patriarch whose children turned on him. What he never does, what he still refuses to do, is sit in accountability. He doesn't acknowledge patterns. He doesn't admit favoritism. He doesn't accept that you don't accidentally lose relationships with most of your children. That takes effort. Consistent effort. For Paedon, watching that performance is its own kind of torture. It's one thing to be estranged privately. It's another thing to see the person who hurt you rewrite the narrative in front of millions. To hear him claim he reaches out when you know he doesn't. To hear him say the door is always open when the last time you saw him was at your brother's funeral. That kind of gaslighting doesn't fade. Hardens. And then there are the fans. Some of them mean well. They think they're offering solidarity. They think hating Kody is a way to support the kids. But hatred doesn't translate into care when it's delivered straight to someone who's still grieving. When a stranger says, "I hate your father," they're not helping Paedon heal. They're asking him to validate their feelings. They're asking him to perform agreement. They're asking him to carry something that doesn't belong to him. Paedon has learned to manage these encounters strategically. Neutral responses. Controlled expressions. Emotional armor. 'Cause honesty would be messy. And messy would go viral. He knows that if he reacts too strongly, someone will record it. Someone will post it. Someone will turn his pain into content. So he swallows it. Over and over again. That's what people miss when they talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness requires space. It requires safety. It requires the absence of new harm. Paedon doesn't have any of those things. His father keeps creating fresh reasons for disappointment. The public keeps reopening old wounds. And the memory of Garrison sits at the center of it all. Impossible to forgive around. Paedon tells people forgiveness is for yourself, not for them. But what he's really describing is acceptance. Acceptance that some parents will never give you what you need. Acceptance that waiting for an apology that will never come only prolongs the pain. Acceptance that the relationship you wanted isn't possible, no matter how much you deserved it. But acceptance isn't peace. Not yet. Because there's another layer to Paedon's story that complicates everything. He didn't just inherit his father's pain. He inherited some of his father's worst traits. Loudness, impulsivity, a tendency to speak before thinking, a habit of shifting blame. These behaviors didn't appear out of nowhere. They were modeled, repeated, normalized. And now Paedon is left trying to unlearn them while the world watches. Some siblings don't speak to him not because of Kody, but because of Paedon himself. That's a reality he can't ignore. It means the damage didn't stop with one generation. Spread. Trauma rarely travels alone. It brings patterns with it. And yet, even knowing all of that, it's impossible not to feel the weight of what Paedon carries. Because no amount of personal failure erases the fact that he grew up in a system designed to fracture. A family where love was conditional, where attention was currency, where one wife's children were prioritized while the others learned to accept absence as normal. Christine left. Janelle moved. Mary retreated. The family scattered across states like survivors of something they don't have words for yet. Flagstaff became a symbol of collapse rather than unity. And Paedon ended up in North Carolina, close to Janelle and Maddie, building a life that looks nothing like the one he was promised growing up. From polygamy to strip club security. From religious modesty to adult entertainment environments. The contrast is jarring but also telling. When you spend your childhood being told what not to do, adulthood sometimes becomes an act of rebellion or survival or both. Deprogramming doesn't happen overnight. Especially when the person who taught you those rules refuses to acknowledge the harm they caused. Paedon's cameos continue. People keep paying. Reddit keeps dissecting. Commentary channels keep analyzing his tone, his pauses, his expressions. Private message becomes public property. His pain becomes talking points. Everyone debates whether he's sincere, whether he's problematic, whether he deserves sympathy. What almost nobody asks is whether he ever gets a break from it. Because every time someone presses play on a cameo, every time someone recognizes him in public, every time a clip resurfaces, Paedon is pulled right back into a story he didn't write and can't escape. He's frozen in a role he never auditioned for. The estranged son of reality TV's most infamous patriarch. And still, the worst pain hasn't even fully surfaced yet. Because everything circles back to one question he can't answer, no matter how many times people ask it. What happens next? Does he reconcile with his father someday? Does he keep the distance forever? Does the silence stretch into decades? Or does it end abruptly, the way it did with Garrison, without warning, without closure, without the chance to say what needed to be said? That uncertainty hangs over every interaction, every cameo, every grocery store encounter, every quiet moment after a long shift. And it's leading somewhere. And this is where everything finally circles back to the truth Paedon has been trying not to say out loud. The truth that sits heavy in his chest every time someone presses record, or hands him $10 and expects closure in return. Because the longer this goes on, the clearer it becomes that the pain isn't fading with time. It's deepening, settling in layers, hardening into something permanent. Paedon doesn't wake up thinking about forgiveness anymore. He wakes up calculating endurance. How much of himself he can give away today without collapsing. How many questions about Kody he can absorb before his voice cracks. How many times he can repeat the same carefully neutral phrasing before the truth leaks through anyway. And it always leaks through because the truth is simple and brutal. The man who was supposed to protect him never stopped hurting him, and the damage didn't end when the cameras shut off. Just changed shape. What makes it worse, what keeps this wound from ever sealing, is that Kody is still out there telling his version of the story. Still framing himself as misunderstood. Still positioning himself as the victim of ungrateful children and disloyal wives. Every interview, every confessional, every carefully worded statement feels like another quiet betrayal. Not loud enough to cause a public scandal, not dramatic enough to force accountability, but sharp enough to reopen everything. Paedon sees it all. His siblings see it all. And every time it happens, it confirms the same unbearable realization. There will be no moment of reckoning. No apology. No sudden self-awareness. Just an endless performance that requires the children to either participate or be erased. Paedon chose neither. Instead, he exists in this strange middle space where he speaks, but only in fragments. He tells fans forgiveness is for yourself, not the other person, but the words sound rehearsed, like something learned in survival mode rather than healing. He talks about moving forward while standing completely still. He offers advice while openly admitting he doesn't follow it. And somehow, people still expect him to be inspirational, as if resilience should come with wisdom, as if trauma automatically produces clarity. Doesn't. Sometimes it just produces endurance. Sometimes it produces a man standing in his kitchen, recording another cameo, forcing calm into his voice while his hands shake just out of frame. And then there's the grief that never gets discussed directly but shapes everything underneath. Garrison's death didn't just shatter the family, it froze it in time. It locked conversations in place, sealed arguments mid-sentence, turned unresolved conflicts into permanent absences. The funeral wasn't closure. It was a line drawn in permanent ink. Whatever happened there, whatever was said or left unsaid, it became the last chapter Paedon would ever share with his father in person. Since that day, the silence hasn't been peaceful. It's been loud, echoing, filled with things that will never be spoken aloud. That's the part fans don't fully understand. They think time heals because television edits grief into arcs with endings. But real grief doesn't resolve itself neatly. Just keeps going. Paedon isn't healing in chapters. He's surviving in fragments. Every reminder of Kody, every fan interaction, every new headline drags him back to moments he didn't choose to relive. And because his family's pain was made public, he doesn't get the luxury of private breakdowns. He has to hold himself together in grocery stores, at work, on sidewalks, while strangers casually unload their anger onto him like it's small talk. The cruelty of it all is subtle, which makes it harder to confront. No one thinks they're doing harm. They think they're bonding. They think they're validating him. They think hatred directed at Kody is solidarity. But Paedon is left carrying it anyway, absorbing emotion that doesn't belong to him, processing rage that isn't his to hold. And because he's been doing this since childhood, managing adult emotions before he ever had the tools to understand his own, it feels familiar. Exhausting but familiar. This is what he was trained for, even if no one ever called it training. The script doesn't pretend Paedon is blameless. It doesn't ask the audience to forget his past or excuse his words. Instead, it forces an uncomfortable reckoning. Trauma doesn't produce saints. Produces people. Complicated, flawed, sometimes infuriating people who are still shaped by the damage done to them. Paedon's estrangement from Gwen, his past behavior, his controversial statements all exist alongside his pain, not in opposition to it. And that's what makes the story hard to consume honestly. There's no clean hero, no perfect victim. Just a family system that failed repeatedly and children who grew up carrying the consequences in different, messy ways. By the time the cameo ends, there's no catharsis, no swelling music moment, no emotional resolution, just a quiet, lingering discomfort, the kind that sticks with you after the screen goes dark. Because once you strip away the spectacle,